"If you're so smart, then translate this," said the CEO, not knowing who he was messing with. Richard Blackwell smirked contemptuously as he tossed the document onto the glass table. His new assistant, hired just a week ago, looked at the paper with a serious expression, her hands steady despite the tension filling the meeting room. "If you're truly as competent as your resume suggests, you should be able to translate this right now," he said, crossing his arms and leaning back in his leather chair, clearly pleased with the embarrassment he was causing. The Japanese investors from Cherry Blossom Group remained silent, watching the scene with curious eyes. Emily Chen carefully picked up the document, her eyes quickly scanning the handwritten characters. Her heart raced as she recognized the delicate handwriting and the red seals decorating the yellowed, aged paper. "This document," she began, her voice firm and clear, "is a property deed dated 1923. It concerns a 15-hectare plot in the Fresno region, inland California, registered under the Chen family name." Richard's smile vanished instantly. The Japanese investors exchanged glances, whispering in their native language. Emily continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "There are also some errors in the proposal you presented earlier. On page 3, where it says Limited Liability Company, the correct term in Japanese would be Yugen Geisha, not Kabushiki Geisha. And on page 5, the mentioned value has an incorrect decimal place. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard felt the blood drain from his face as Emily turned the document over, revealing the official seal he had overlooked. "I can also explain why I recognize this deed," she continued, looking directly into the CEO's eyes. "Because it belonged to my grandfather, George Chen, founder of the first Japanese agricultural cooperative in the region. The same property that was sold under pressure 20 years ago to a young businessman who promised to keep the rural workers employed." Richard swallowed hard. The name Chen echoed in his mind like an alarm bell. 20 years ago, he had bought that land for a fraction of its real value, promising to keep the cooperative running. Instead, he evicted all the families and sold the property to a major construction company. Emily watched recognition spread across his face like a slow, inevitable wave. She had used her mother's maiden name, Smith, to get the job. Her true identity had remained hidden until this moment. "My father was forced to start over in Japan after losing everything," she said, her voice heavy with restrained emotion. "He spent the last 20 years working in factories to support our family, while you built your empire on the ruin of others. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out." Now, continuing. The Japanese investors began murmuring among themselves, clearly impressed by Emily's knowledge and composure. Mr. Wong, the group's leader, leaned forward. "Chen-san," he said in perfect Japanese, "your family has always been respected in our business community. If I may ask, what is your academic background?" Emily replied in the same language, explaining her studies in international law at Stanford University and her specialization in international business. The conversation flowed naturally, leaving Richard completely out of the loop, unable to follow the dialogue. "I would like Miss Chen to join all our meetings from now on," declared Wong, switching back to English. "Her perspective will be invaluable to our business." Richard tried to regain control of the situation. "I apologize, but that won't be possible. Miss Smith, or Chen, is being dismissed immediately for withholding important information during the hiring process." "On the contrary," interrupted another Japanese investor, "if she is dismissed, we will consider it a grave lack of respect and withdraw our investment proposal." The tension in the room was palpable. Richard found himself caught between the need for Japanese investment and the discomfort of having Emily nearby. She, in turn, remained calm, as if she had anticipated this exact situation. After the meeting, Emily returned to her desk on the lower floor, where she worked alongside other assistants. Mrs. Williams, the company's longest-serving secretary, discreetly approached her. "Dear, I've worked here for 30 years and never seen anyone leave Richard so unsettled," she whispered, glancing around to ensure they weren't being watched. "But be careful. He won't let this slide. Emily smiled softly. Mrs. Williams, do you know the company's old records well? I know every piece of paper that's passed through this company since I started here, the older woman replied, adjusting her glasses. Why do you ask? Because I imagine many interesting things must be stored in the archives. Mrs. Williams studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. You're not just an ordinary assistant, are you? There's something more behind all this. Emily didn't answer directly, but her expression said it all. Mrs. Williams had worked in companies long enough to recognize when someone had a bigger plan in mind. In the following days, mysterious documents began appearing on Richard's desk. Old contracts, questionable payment receipts, correspondence he thought he'd destroyed long ago. With each new paper, his anxiety grew. Emily, meanwhile, seemed to have settled perfectly into the company's routine. She arrived early, worked efficiently, and treated everyone with kindness. But Richard knew she was plotting something. He could feel it. During Thursday's lunch break, Emily was organizing some documents when Andrew Blackwell, Richard's son, appeared at her desk. Freshly graduated in business administration, he had started working at his father's company just 2 weeks prior. "Hi, you're Emily, right?" he asked with a genuine smile. "I heard you really impressed the Japanese investors at this week's meeting." Emily looked at the young man. He had his father's height, but his eyes were kinder, less calculating. He appeared to be around 25 and carried a worn leather briefcase. "I just did my job," she replied diplomatically. "My dad seems really on edge lately," Andrew commented, lowering his voice. "He's never like this, usually so confident in meetings. Did something happen?" Emily studied his face, searching for signs of malice or manipulation, but found only genuine curiosity. He clearly didn't know about the past between their families. "Maybe he's just worried about the new investments," she said carefully. "Could be," Andrew agreed. "He's been working late. Last night I found him in the office at 11, digging through old file boxes." The information made Emily's heart race. Richard was clearly searching for incriminating documents, trying to clean house before she could use them against him. That evening, Emily stayed in the office past her usual hours. Once most employees had left, she went down to the basement where the old archives were kept. Mrs. Williams had casually mentioned where the spare key was. The basement corridors were dimly lit, the air smelling of old paper and dampness. Emily walked between the metal shelves, searching for files from the 90s. Her hands trembled slightly when she found the boxes labeled 19999 to 2005. Inside the first box, she found exactly what she expected: contracts for buying and selling rural properties, correspondence with lawyers, and financial documents. But there was something more. A separate folder with the label Special Projects, Confidential. Emily opened the folder, and her eyes widened. It wasn't just her family's land. Richard had done this to at least 5 other rural properties in the region. Always the same pattern: broken promises, evicted families, land sold to developers. "Find what you were looking for?" Emily turned quickly. Mrs. Williams stood at the entrance of the archive, arms crossed. "Mrs. Williams, you startled me." "I figured you'd come here sooner or later," the older woman said, stepping into the archive. "That's why I decided to stay and help." "Help?" "Dear, I've worked here for 30 years. You think I didn't notice what was happening?" Mrs. Williams walked closer and looked at the folder in Emily's hands. "I saw when those families came here begging not to lose their land. I saw the tears of the elders who had built everything from scratch, and I saw how Richard treated them." Emily felt a lump in her throat. "Did you keep evidence?" "I kept copies of everything," Mrs. Williams confirmed, "not because I had a plan, but because my conscience wouldn't let me rest. I knew one day this information would be important." The two women spent the next hour examining documents. With each paper uncovered, the picture became clearer. Richard hadn't just destroyed Emily's family. He'd done the same to dozens of other rural families. "There's one more thing," Mrs. Williams said hesitantly. 2 years ago, Richard's wife came to me. Mrs. Catherine was very shaken, asking about some documents she'd found at home. "What kind of documents?" "Loan contracts with predatory interest rates. It seems Richard was in serious financial trouble and doing business with dangerous people." Emily absorbed this information. Richard was vulnerable, more than she'd realized. That explained why he was so desperate to close the deal with the Japanese investors. On Friday, she arrived at the company with renewed determination. She'd spent the night planning her next steps. This wasn't just about personal revenge, it was about justice for all the families who had been wronged. That morning, she received an unexpected call. It was her mother, Lily, calling from Japan. "Sweetheart, your father is worried," the gentle voice said on the other end. "He had a strange dream last night about Grandpa's property. Are you all right?" Emily glanced around the office, making sure no one was listening. "I'm fine, Mom, and tell Dad not to worry. Grandpa's property will come back to the family." "Emily, don't do anything dangerous. We lost the land, but we never lost our dignity. That's more important." "I know, Mom. Trust me." After hanging up, Emily felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Her family had suffered in silence for 20 years, but she had a chance to right this injustice. By late afternoon, Richard called her into his office. He was visibly tense, with dark circles under his eyes and his hands trembling slightly. "Sit down," he said without looking up from the papers on his desk. "We need to talk." Emily sat calmly, folding her hands in her lap. "I know who you are and why you're here," Richard continued. "The question is, what do you want?" "I want justice," she replied simply. "Justice?" Richard laughed bitterly. "That was 20 years ago. It was a legitimate business deal." "Legitimate?" Emily leaned forward. "You promised to keep 60 families employed." "He promised the cooperative would keep running. Instead, he evicted everyone and sold the land for 10 times what he paid. It was business. Your father understood that." "My father had a nervous breakdown and was hospitalized for 3 months," Emily replied, her voice turning icy, sending a chill down Richard's spine. "He lost everything. The land, his dignity, his trust in people. We had to start from scratch in Japan, where he worked in factories until he was 60 to support us." Richard stayed silent for a moment. "What do you want? Money? I can make a generous offer for you to just disappear." "I don't want your money," Emily said, standing up. "I want you to face the consequences of your actions, and I want every family you harmed to get the compensation they deserve. You're dreaming if you think you can blackmail me. It's not blackmail, it's justice, and it's coming faster than you think." Emily walked out of the office with her head held high, leaving Richard alone with his fears and regrets. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Over the weekend, Emily met with Mrs. Williams at a downtown cafe. The secretary had brought a box full of documents she'd copied over the years. "Listen, dear," Mrs. Williams said, lowering her voice. "There's something I've never told anyone. 5 years ago, the daughter of one of the evicted families came to the company. She'd become a lawyer and wanted to sue Richard." "What happened?" "She died in a car accident a week later. It might have been a coincidence, but I always thought it was strange." Emily felt a chill. This was worse than she'd imagined. "Do you have her name?" "Dr. Jennifer Taylor. She was a brilliant young woman, a Harvard graduate, left behind a husband and 2 small children." Emily wrote down the name. Later, she'd look into that accident herself. On Monday, the company was buzzing. The Japanese investors had scheduled another meeting to present final proposals. Emily arrived early and found Andrew Blackwell waiting for her in the lobby. "Emily, can we talk?" he asked, looking worried. They went to the empty break room. Andrew glanced around nervously before speaking. "My father's acting really strange. Last night I heard him yelling on the phone with someone. He was talking about debts and deadlines." Emily studied the young man's face. He genuinely didn't know about his father's financial troubles. "Andrew, are you sure you want to work for your father's company?" "Why do you ask?" "Because sometimes the people we love aren't who we think they are." Andrew looked confused. "Are you trying to tell me something about my father?" Before Emily could answer, Richard appeared in the doorway. "Andrew, you should be reviewing the monthly reports, not chatting with employees," he said sharply. "Dad, I was just... Go to your office, now." Andrew gave Emily an apologetic look and left. Richard closed the door behind him. "Stay away from my son," he said quietly. Or what? You'll fire me? Emily challenged. The Japanese have made it clear my presence is a condition for the investment. There are other ways to handle problems, Richard muttered. Emily felt a shiver of fear but kept her expression steady. If anything happens to me, a full dossier of evidence about your activities will be sent to the press automatically. You're bluffing. Want to find out? Richard stared at her for a long moment, then stormed out, slamming the door. That afternoon, Emily got a call from an unknown number. Hello? Mrs. Chen. This is Dr. Michael Taylor. I'm the husband of Jennifer Taylor, who passed away 5 years ago. Emily Chen's heart raced. Dr. Michael, how did you get my number? Mrs. Williams reached out to me. She said you're investigating the company where my wife was working on the case against Richard Blackwell. That's true. Can we meet? They arranged to meet the next day at a discreet restaurant. Dr. Michael was a tired-looking man, around 40 with graying hair. He carried a folder of documents. My wife was obsessed with justice, he began. When she learned about the evicted families, she couldn't sleep properly for weeks. She was determined to prove Richard had committed fraud. What did she find? That the contracts had illegal clauses written in fine print, that Richard used insider information about urban zoning to know the lands would appreciate, and that he bribed public officials to speed up the processes. Dr. Michael opened the folder and showed copies of documents Emily had never seen. Jennifer had obtained testimonies from 3 public officials willing to confirm the bribes. She was ready to present the case to the district attorney. Why didn't you present it after her passing? Because one day after the accident, our house was broken into. They only took the computers and her office files. Nothing else was touched. Not the TV, not jewelry, nothing. Emily felt a knot in her stomach. You suspect that... I can't prove anything, but my wife was an extremely careful driver. She'd never even gotten a ticket. And suddenly she loses control of the car on a road she knew perfectly. They were silent for a moment. Dr. Michael, I'll continue the work your wife started, but I need you to keep these documents in a safe place. They're already in a safe deposit box at the bank, with instructions to be released to the press if anything happens to me or you. Emily smiled for the first time since the conversation began. Your wife chose her partner well. On Wednesday, the day of the final meeting with the Japanese investors arrived. Emily got to the company an hour early to review all the documents. She found Mrs. Williams already waiting for her. Dear, I have news, the secretary said, handing her a manila envelope. I received this in the morning, no sender. Inside the envelope was a photo of Emily leaving her house and a note. Stop while there's still time. Mrs. Williams, starting today, you must be very careful. Go straight home after work and don't go out alone at night. And you, dear, you're not going to stop, are you? I can't stop now. We're too close. The meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock. When Emily entered the conference room, she found not only the Japanese investors, but also 2 American men she didn't recognize. Richard introduced them as specialized financial consultants. Emily felt something was off. The new men watched her with excessive interest, and Richard seemed more confident than he had been in recent days. The presentation began normally, with Richard outlining the company's expansion plans, but when it was time for the Japanese investors to make their proposals, Mr. Wong addressed Emily directly. Chen-san, we'd like you to explain your vision for the company's future, he said in Japanese. Emily responded fluently, explaining her ideas about corporate social responsibility and sustainable development. She spoke about the importance of correcting past mistakes and building trust with local communities. The Japanese investors exchanged satisfied glances. One whispered something to Wong, who nodded gravely. We've made a decision, Wong announced in English. We are willing to invest in the company, but on one condition. We want Miss Chen to be appointed as Director of Operations and Corporate Social Responsibility. Richard Blackwell's face paled. That's impossible. She's just an assistant. She doesn't have the experience for an executive role. On the contrary, interrupted another Japanese investor. We've done our own research on Miss Chen. She holds a master's in international business administration and has experience with major corporations in Japan. Her resume here was a simplified version of her actual qualifications. Emily kept her expression neutral. but inside, she smiled. The Japanese had done exactly what she expected. Furthermore, Wong continued, we've uncovered some irregularities in the company's financial documents that concern us. Miss Chen will oversee a full audit before we finalize the investment. The two consultants accompanying Richard exchanged nervous glances. Emily realized they weren't legitimate advisors, but likely associates of Richard's creditors. Gentlemen, Richard said, struggling to maintain composure, perhaps we can discuss these details in a private meeting. There's nothing to discuss, Wong replied firmly. This is our final offer. Miss Chen as Director of Operations or no deal. Just then, Andrew entered the room with an urgent expression. Dad, sorry to interrupt, but there are people in reception who need to speak with you. They said it's about overdue payments. Richard clenched his fists. His financial troubles were unraveling publicly. Tell them to wait, he muttered. They said they won't wait, Andrew insisted, glancing nervously at the Japanese investors. And there are journalists with them. The silence in the room was deafening. Emily knew this was the moment she'd been waiting for. She stood calmly. Gentlemen, perhaps it's best we postpone this meeting until the company's financial matters are clarified. No, Richard exclaimed. I accept the terms. Emily will be appointed director. But Wong was already gathering his documents. Mr. Blackwell, we need full transparency before proceeding. We'll be in touch once the audit is complete. The Japanese investors left, followed by Richard's two consultants. Andrew remained, looking confused between his father and Emily. Dad, what's going on? What's this about overdue payments? Richard slumped into his chair, burying his head in his hands. Andrew, leave. Now. I'm not leaving, the young man said firmly. I want to know what's happening to our company. Emily looked at Andrew with sympathy. He was about to learn painful truths about his father. Andrew, she said gently, maybe you should sit down. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. In the following days, Richard's situation continued to deteriorate. Creditors showed up daily at the company, journalists asked tough questions, and employees grew anxious about their job security. Meanwhile, Emily worked discreetly with a team of independent auditors hired by the Japanese. Every document reviewed revealed more irregularities. Andrew sought out Emily on Thursday, looking exhausted. Emily, can I trust you? He asked. You can talk to me. My father's been lying to me. Last night I overheard him on the phone talking about selling our house. Our house, Emily. The one I grew up in. Emily felt genuine pity for the young man. Andrew, there are things about your father you need to know. What kind of things? Things that will hurt you, but you have a right to know. She told him about the evicted families, about the broken promises, about the suffering Richard had caused over the years. Andrew listened in silence, his face growing paler with each revelation. This can't be true, he murmured. My father always said he was an honest man. I have documents that prove everything, Andrew, and you have the right to see them. They spent the afternoon in the records room, with Andrew examining contracts and correspondence. With each document, his expression grew darker. Why are you showing me this? He finally asked. Because you're not your father. You have the chance to choose a different path. What do you want from me? Nothing you don't want to give, but if you want to help right the wrongs of the past, I'll accept your help. Andrew fell silent for a long moment. Does my mother know about this? I don't know. You'll have to ask her. That night, Andrew went home, determined to confront his parents. He found them in the dining room, eating in silence. The tension between them was palpable. Mom, Dad, we need to talk, he said, sitting at the table. Not now, Andrew, murmured Richard. I'm tired. No, it has to be now, the young man insisted. I want to know the truth about the company, about the families evicted from the rural lands, about the bribes, about everything. Catherine Blackwell dropped her fork onto her plate. Andrew, what are you talking about? Emily showed me documents, Mom. Papers that prove Dad destroyed the lives of dozens of families. Richard exploded. That woman is poisoning your mind. She's the daughter of one of the farmers who lost their land. She's here for revenge. And isn't she right? Asked Andrew. After everything you've done? Catherine looked from her son to her husband. Richard, is this true? Did you really do these things? It was business, Catherine. It was legal. Legal doesn't mean moral, Andrew shot back. How many families lost their homes because of your greed? Watch your tone, boy. Or what? You'll kick me out too. Catherine stood up from the table. Richard, I want to see those documents. Now. Catherine, you don't understand business. I understand right and wrong, she shouted. And if you did half of what Andrew is saying, then I don't know the man I married. That night, the Blackwell family split into opposing sides. Catherine locked herself in the bedroom. Andrew went to a friend's house and Richard stayed alone in the living room, drinking whiskey and staring at the wreckage of his life. On Friday, Emily arrived at work and found an envelope on her desk. Inside was a note from Catherine Blackwell. We need to talk. Rose's Bistro, 12:30 p.m. Come alone. Emily arrived at the restaurant nervously. Catherine was sitting at a table in the back, wearing sunglasses despite the indoor lighting. She looked as if she had cried all night. Thank you for coming, Catherine said as Emily sat down. I know you must hate me. I don't hate you, Mrs. Blackwell. You weren't responsible for your husband's decisions. But I lived off the benefits of those decisions, the woman murmured. Our home, our cars, Andrew's education, all of it came from the money Richard made by destroying families. Emily stayed silent, letting Catherine speak. I brought something for you, Catherine continued, pulling a folder from her bag. These are documents Richard kept at home. Contracts, receipts, correspondence. He doesn't know I took them. Emily opened the folder and her eyes widened. The evidence was even more damning than she had imagined. Why are you giving me this? Because 20 years ago, when Richard came home celebrating the purchase of the Japanese lands, I asked about the families who lived there. He told me they had happily agreed to the sale and were glad to start fresh somewhere else. Catherine removed her sunglasses, revealing red, tear-stained eyes. I believed him. I wanted to believe my husband was a good man who did honest business. But deep down, I always knew something was wrong. What made you change your mind? 2 years ago, an elderly woman showed up at our door. She said she'd lost her home because of Richard and was struggling to get by. I gave her money and asked Richard to explain. He said she was just a crazy woman trying to scam us. Emily felt her heart tighten. What did she look like? Small, with grey hair and a Japanese accent. She cried so much and kept repeating a name. George something. George Chen, Emily finished, tears welling in her eyes. She was my grandmother. Catherine covered her mouth with her hands. Oh my God, she was your grandmother? Yes. She passed away last year, never having gotten over losing her land. She died, dreaming of returning to the United States. The two women cried together for a few minutes. Then Catherine composed herself. Emily, I want to help. Tell me what we need to do to make this right. You need to be sure this is what you want. Once the truth comes out, your life will change completely. My life has already changed, Catherine said firmly. The moment I found out who my husband really is. They spent the rest of lunch making plans. Catherine agreed to testify about everything she knew and to hand over any documents she could find at home. Over the weekend, Emily worked tirelessly organizing all the evidence. She had documents from Mrs. Williams, Dr. Michael Taylor, Catherine, and her own findings. The picture was complete. On Monday, she scheduled a meeting with Mr. Wong and presented a detailed report on the company's irregularities. The Japanese investors were shocked by the extent of the problems. Chen-san, Wong said, this is far worse than we imagined. We can't invest in a company with this history. I understand completely, Emily replied, but I'd like to propose an alternative. She explained her idea. Instead of investing in Richard's company, The Japanese could form a new one with her as CEO. The new company would buy the clean assets of the current one and implement a reparations program for the affected families. "It's an interesting proposal," Wong said. "But would you have local support for something like this?" "Yes. Andrew Blackwell has already agreed to join as operations director. And Mrs. Williams, who knows all the company's processes, will be our administrative director." On Tuesday, Emily requested a meeting with Richard. He received her in his office, clearly nervous and worn out. "I've come to make a proposal," she said. "What kind of proposal?" "You voluntarily step down as company president, transfer your assets to a reparations fund for the affected families, and in return, I won't publicly expose all the evidence I have against you." Richard laughed bitterly. "You want me to hand over everything for free? I want you to face the consequences of your actions, but I'm offering you a dignified way out." "And if I refuse?" Emily placed a folder on his desk. "Then this folder goes straight to the press, the authorities, and every relevant agency. You choose, walk out the front door or the window." Richard opened the folder and paled at the photocopies of every incriminating document. "How did you get this?" "That doesn't matter. What matters is you have 48 hours to decide." Emily stood to leave, but Richard called out to her. "Why are you doing this? Why not just destroy me?" She turned to look at him. "Because destroying you won't restore dignity to the families you hurt. But making amends might. What about Andrew? Is he involved in this? Andrew is trying to fix his father's mistakes, something you should have done long ago." Emily left the office, leaving Richard alone with his decision. That evening, she had dinner with Andrew at a Japanese restaurant in Chinatown. The young man was visibly shaken but determined. "Will my father accept your proposal?" he asked. "I don't know. It depends on how much pride he's willing to swallow. And if he doesn't accept, then we'll proceed with the original plan. The truth will come out one way or another." Andrew pushed his food around without appetite. "Emily, can I ask you something personal?" "Go ahead." "Do you hate me? For being his son?" Emily studied the young man's face. She saw genuine sincerity and remorse. "No, Andrew, you're not responsible for your father's choices, and you're proving to be a better man than he is. My mother wants to talk to you too. She's thinking of leaving him. How do you feel about that?" "Relieved," he admitted. In recent years, she'd become a sad and bitter person. Now that she knows the truth, she seems to have found some kind of peace. On Wednesday, Richard asked to speak with Emily. When she entered his office, she found him visibly aged, with more wrinkles and graying hair than just a week before. "I accept your proposal," he said, avoiding her gaze. "Are you sure? I don't have a choice, do I? If I don't accept, you'll destroy what little is left of my reputation." "Richard, this isn't about destroying you. It's about doing what's right." "Doing what's right?" He laughed bitterly. "You know something? 20 years ago, when I bought your family's land, I truly believed I was making a good deal. I didn't think about the consequences for the people. And now? Do you think about them?" Richard finally looked at her. "Now I think about them every night, especially after your grandmother showed up at my door 2 years ago." Emily's heart raced. "You remember her?" "I do. She looked so lost." She spoke in Japanese mixed with English, saying she just wanted to see the land one last time before she died. "What did you tell her?" "I said I couldn't help, that the land wasn't mine anymore." Richard paused, but that was a lie. "I still had the original maps, the old photos. I could have taken her to see what was left of the property." Emily felt tears in her eyes. "She died dreaming of coming home." "I know, and it haunts me." They sat in silence for a moment. "Emily, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "What happens to me now?" "That depends on you. If you truly help make amends, if your remorse is sincere, there might still be a chance for redemption. And if I can't, if I find out I'm too late to change?" "It's never too late to do what's right," Emily said softly. "My grandmother always said the most important thing isn't how much we've wronged, but how much we're willing to make it right." On Thursday, the company's restructuring was officially announced. Richard would step down as chairman, Emily would take over as CEO, and a reparations fund would be created for the affected families. The news caused a stir in the local press. Journalists wanted to understand how an assistant had taken control of a multinational corporation in just 1 month. Emily held a press conference explaining her true identity and qualifications, but focused mainly on the company's future and the reparations program. "We're not here to punish the past," she told the cameras, "but to build a fairer future." Over the weekend, Emily received an emotional call from her mother in Japan. "Sweetheart, I saw the news on Japanese television. Your father is crying with joy." "How is he, Mom?" "Better than he's been in 20 years. He says he can finally sleep in peace. Tell him I'm bringing you both back to the United States, back home." "We'd love that. But dear, are you sure you're doing the right thing? Forgiving that man?" "Grandma always said that revenge is like swallowing poison and waiting for your enemy to die. Forgiveness is liberation, Mum." The following Monday, Emily officially began as CEO. Her first meeting was with representatives from all the families who had been wronged by Richard over the years. The gathering was emotional. Many of those present were elderly people who had lost not only their land, but also their hope. Emily explained the reparations program, financial compensation, healthcare assistance, support to re-establish small businesses. "We know money can't erase suffering," she said, "but we hope it will be a first step toward healing." An elderly woman stood up at the back of the room. "My name is Mrs. Jenkins. I lost my land 15 years ago. I want to know one thing. Is this program real or just pretty words?" Emily smiled. "Mrs. Jenkins, you'll receive the first payment next week, and if you'd like, we can help you purchase new rural property." The room erupted in applause and tears of joy. Andrew, who had been observing the meeting, approached Emily afterward. "How do you do this? How can you be so generous after everything you've been through?" "Because I've learned that holding on to hate is like carrying stones in your heart. It's time to put the stones down and build something new with them." In the weeks that followed, the company's transformation was dramatic. Employees who had once been demotivated began working with renewed enthusiasm. The press praised the new management, and new investors took interest in the company. Richard, meanwhile, fulfilled his part of the agreement by working as a consultant for the reparations program. He personally visited each affected family, apologizing and explaining how the compensation would work. At first, people were hostile, but gradually, seeing his sincerity, some began to forgive. A month after the restructuring, Emily organized a special ceremony. She had invited all the beneficiary families, company employees, Japanese investors, and even some journalists. During the ceremony, she announced the official establishment of the George Chen Institute for Sustainable Rural Development, named in honor of her grandfather. "This institute," she explained, "will support small rural producers, preserve farming traditions, and ensure no family is ever unjustly evicted from their land again." The biggest surprise came when Richard took the stage. "I want to publicly apologize," he said, his voice trembling with emotion, "to all the families I've harmed. I know words can't undo the suffering I've caused, but I hope my actions from now on will show my genuine remorse." He announced he was donating his entire personal fortune to the institute, keeping only enough to live modestly. The audience fell silent, processing his statement. Then slowly some began to applaud. It wasn't full forgiveness, but it was a start. After the ceremony, Emily was approached by Dr. Michael Taylor, widower of the lawyer who had died investigating Richard. "Emily, my wife would be proud to see this," he said, tears in his eyes. "She always believed justice would prevail." "Dr. Taylor, I have a proposal. Would you consider leading the Institute's legal department? It would be an honor." Andrew approached the two. "Emily, can I speak with you privately?" They stepped away from the crowd. "I want to thank you," he said, "for everything, for showing me the truth, for giving my father a chance to redeem himself, for believing I could be different from him." "Andrew, you always were different from him. You just needed to see it. There's something I want to tell you. I've decided to go back to school. I'm getting a master's in corporate social responsibility. That's a wonderful decision. And there's one more thing. He hesitated. I know our situation is complicated, with all the history between our families, but I'd like to invite you to dinner. Not as co-workers, but as people who admire each other. Emily smiled. Andrew, it would be my pleasure. But we have to take it slow. Some wounds are still healing. I completely understand. We have time. 3 months later, Emily's parents arrived from Japan. The reunion at the airport was emotional. Her father, James, looked visibly older, but his eyes shone with happiness. My daughter, he said in Japanese, you've brought honor to our family and to Grandpa's memory. Dad, now we can truly start over. Emily had bought a small house in Chinatown for her parents. It was simple but comfortable, and close to the institute she had founded. James insisted on working despite his age. Emily appointed him as the institute's cultural consultant, responsible for preserving Japanese traditions in the rural American community. It's ironic, he remarked one day, while visiting one of the rural properties the institute had helped restore. We lost our land, but we found our purpose. Richard's transformation continued to surprise everyone. He moved into a small apartment, sold all his luxury possessions, and devoted all his time to the institute. Catherine finalized the divorce, but amicably. She also became a volunteer at the institute, coordinating programs to support rural women. For the first time in years, she told Emily during lunch, I feel useful. I'm proud of what I do. The relationship between Emily and Andrew blossomed slowly. They were careful not to mix personal and professional matters, but it was clear there was a genuine connection between them. During dinner, 6 months after the company's restructuring, Andrew made a confession. Emily, can I tell you something? The first day I saw you at the company, I knew you were special. Not because you were beautiful or smart, but because you had something I'd never seen before. What? Purpose. You knew exactly why you were there and what you wanted to achieve. I envied that. And now? Have you found your purpose? I have. I want to help build a world where companies are forces for good, not destruction. A year after Emily joined the company, a grand celebration was held. The institute had helped over 100 families, the company had tripled its profits by operating ethically, and 3 other businesses had adopted the management model Emily created. During the party, Mrs. Williams, now the institute's administrative director, approached Emily. Dear, do you remember what I told you on your first day? That I'd never seen anyone leave Richard speechless like that. I remember. Well, now I can say I've never seen anyone transform a company like this. You didn't just change the company, you changed people. Emily looked around the party. She saw Richard enthusiastically explaining new sustainable techniques to a group of farmers. She saw Andrew presenting the student exchange program he had created. She saw her parents laughing with other members of the Japanese community. Mrs. Williams, she said, I didn't change anyone. I just gave people the chance to show who they really are. The party lasted late into the night. When most guests had left, Emily stood alone in the company garden gazing at the stars. Andrew found her there. What are you thinking about? He asked, sitting beside her. I'm thinking about my grandmother. She always said the stars are the tears of our ancestors, turned into light to guide their descendants. Do you think she'd be proud? I think she'd be at peace. That's all she ever wanted. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the stars. Emily, Andrew finally said, I have a confession to make. What is it? I'm in love with you. I know our situation is complicated. I know it might be too soon. But I can't pretend these are just professional feelings anymore. Emily smiled. Andrew, you can stop apologizing for falling in love with me. Why? Because I'm in love with you too. They kissed under the stars, sealing not only their love, but the union of 2 families who had found healing through forgiveness. 2 years later, Emily and Andrew married in a simple ceremony in the Institute's garden. Richard walked the bride down the aisle, a symbolic gesture of how their relationships had transformed. During the wedding speech, Emily spoke about the importance of turning pain into purpose, hatred into love, and destruction into creation. 3 years ago, she said, I came to this company seeking revenge. Today, I've found a new family, a life purpose, and the certainty that forgiveness is the most powerful force for change in the world. Richard, sitting in the front row, wiped a tear from his face. Beside him, Catherine smiled proudly at the woman who had become like a daughter to her. Emily's parents watched, moved. James held his wife's hand, whispering in Japanese, "Father, she did it. Our girl brought honor and peace to our family." The institute continued to grow. 5 years after its founding, it had become an international model for corporate social responsibility. Emily was often invited to speak around the world, always sharing the message that businesses can be forces for positive change. Richard, now 70, had become the face of genuine remorse and corporate redemption. He wrote a book about his journey, donating all royalties to the institute. Andrew completed his master's degree and took over as CEO of the company, while Emily devoted herself fully to the institute. They had 2 children, George, named after his great-grandfather, and Lily, named after her grandmother. One Sunday afternoon, 3 generations of the family gathered in Emily's garden. The children played on the lawn while the adults talked on the porch. Grandpa Richard, little 5-year-old George, said, "Tell the story about when you were mean." Richard smiled, lifting his grandson onto his lap. "I wasn't mean, my little one, I was lost. Sometimes grown-ups lose their way and do bad things, but your mommy helped me find my way back. And now you're good? Now I try to be better every day." Emily watched the scene with emotion. 3 years ago, she never could have imagined Richard would be a loving grandfather to her children. Life had a curious way of healing wounds that once seemed unhealable. James approached his daughter. "You saved more than our family's honor," he said. "You saved lost souls." "Dad, I just did what Grandma would have done. She always said the real victory is when everyone wins. She would be proud. I know she is." The sun set on the horizon, painting the sky in golden hues. In the distance, the buildings of the business district where it all began were visible. Now, that company stood as a symbol of transformation and hope. Emily took Andrew's hand, watching their children play with the grandfather they had learned to forgive. On her desk, she kept a photo of her family's original property, which had been turned into a public ecological park. "What are you thinking about?" Andrew asked. "I'm thinking Grandma was right. Tears really do turn into light when they find the right purpose. And what's our purpose now? To keep building a world where justice and forgiveness walk hand in hand." Night fell gently over the gathered family. In the sky, the stars began to appear one by one, like tiny beacons of hope, lighting the way for future generations. Emily smiled, feeling her grandmother's presence in every gentle breeze that rustled the leaves in the garden. Revenge had turned into healing, hatred into love, and pain into purpose. This was exactly how it was meant to be. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. Were you moved by Richard's transformation? Do you believe it's possible to forgive those who've hurt us so deeply? Share your honest thoughts in the comments. We love reading every message. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other heartfelt stories like this one.